Hello and welcome back to Catch and Cook California. I'm Kevin. In this series, I'm going to walk you through some of my favorite mushrooms that are abundant here in California in the wetter months. I'm going to walk you through those mushrooms that I think are easiest to learn to identify. We're going to look at specific features of those mushrooms to learn how to distinguish edible mushrooms from potentially toxic or even poisonous lookalikes. And at the end of each one of these videos, we're going to do a little gourmet taste test. Today, we're talking all about the king bolete, aka porcini.
I also want to tell you about my new drone.
Let's go. Porcini. And there's another. And there's another one. Look at that. What a beauty. Perfect. Like a hamburger bun. Her. You're thinking?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it's that, and it's...
I doubt you can hear that, but there's a bunch of coyotes over there that just made a kill, and they're all signaling to each other to come share in that kill. So, this is a classic porcini. Feels a little soft at the base, even though it's quite young. Not too olive green or anything. It's still like a chestnut to tan color under the cap in that porous layer, which is the base of tightly packed tubes, because it is a bolete. It has a finely netted texture up toward the top of the stem and sort of a bulbous base. It's typically pretty thick, chestnut color on top, that kind of nice brownish, and usually convex in shape. Now, in my opinion, there's no real lookalike for the porcini that you really need to be worried about, but on occasion, someone will confuse an edible bolete, the family that porcinis are in, with a toxic bolete. And there are a few toxic boletes that do warrant some discussion. The main thing to keep in mind is red-pored bolete, do not eat. I've been wanting to show you this one for a while, if it is what I think it is. I'm pretty sure I just found a Satan's bolete, one of the most potently poisonous of all of the family boletes. The same family as porcinis, butter boletes, etc. Check this out. Oh yeah, that is a Satan's bolete right there. Look at that. Take very special note of those red pores. Red pores on a bolete means do not eat. Okay, obviously very buggy, so even if it was an edible species, it wouldn't be good to eat. But what I really want to draw your attention to is this bluing. I want you to see how it goes through a chemical reaction and turns blue. Now, not all species that turn blue like this are going to be toxic, but the bluing combined with those red pores is a direct indication of it being a highly toxic species of bolete. Now I know that you can see what I'm talking about. Red pores, staining blue, do not mess with this. So it does seem pretty obvious being able to tell the difference between an edible bolete and one of these toxic red-pored boletes. That being said, I have to tell you a brief story. I once knew a guy, keep in mind this is the same guy who would go out and pick mussels in the middle of summer during quarantine. Not wise. You know, if you take mussels in the wrong time of year, it's just like picking the wrong mushroom. You can straight up kill yourself doing that. Well, this guy went out and picked a Satan's bolete with red pores, and he saw the red pores, and then he started chopping it up, and it started staining blue, which Satan's bolete will do, and porcini will not do. And he ignored those signs, and then he cooked them up, and he fed them to himself, and he fed them to his roommates. And by the time that he and his roommates made it to the hospital, a couple of hours later, they were at 30% kidney function. So if it wasn't for modern medicine, those guys would be dead. Well, I talked with him quite a bit about this at that time, and I learned a few things from his experience. One thing he told me was, regardless of what people will tell you, just because a mushroom is poisonous does not mean it doesn't taste amazing. That stuck with me. Another thing I learned is don't ever eat dinner at his house. And that ties into the third thing, which is something that I always maintain, and that is always be 100% positive on your own identification. Don't rely on someone else to identify something for you. So if someone brings you mushrooms and says, oh, these are this type of mushroom, they're good to eat, that ought to put up some red flags for you, because you didn't key it out. You didn't pick it in the woods. If it doesn't have the base of the mushroom, you can't tell, is it part of the Amanita family or something else? In my courses, you always learn how to use the book, and you learn how to be 100% positive on your own identification, so that when you leave the course, we are all in agreement that this is this species because we all walked through it together. That's what I want for you. I want autonomous, safe foragers. That way, you can enjoy this for years to come. So it definitely takes a minute to train your eye. And a lot of times you're kind of rushing to get to a spot. Once you get there, it's super important to just calm down, take your time. Now we're looking for very subtle patterns, especially like a little hamburger bun sticking out from underneath some of the brush, or maybe even just a little hump underneath the duff, the leaf litter down below. We call it a shrump, a little shroom hump. So you never know what it's going to be, which is why you gotta uncover these shrumps. This one is probably a Rusula. Yep. So, boom, look at that. And you can see down in here, this white network is the mycelium. So we're going to completely cover that back up to help protect it. That is a beauty. You can see the much lighter color, almost whitish, starting to turn that sort of olive brown, and you can see the olive green right down in there in that porous layer. Beautiful. Diane doesn't want to grab this one because it's down in the berry bushes. She can make me do all the work. So
do it.
Point out where you saw it.
Okay.
Nice. Oh yes, it's in such good freaking shape too. Look at that. So it's got one little slug. We're gonna move that. You can see where probably a slug or an insect has tasted it. No staining of the white flesh, so we know for sure that's porcini with that netting up top as well. It's got that olive greenish up in here going to a slight brown. That's about as good as it gets as far as the sound. And if you give it a squeeze, it's real solid, so we know it's not full of bugs. This is about as perfect as they get. So Diane found the other one right there, about 10 feet away, steps over the log, and right here. Look at this. Again, she doesn't want to get into it because it's this is native blackberry with those real fine thorns. I'm just going to move this out of the way. Boom. Cover this back over. Trust me when I say if you do this in the field, your job in the kitchen will be way easier. Have a lot less stuff that's going to fall down into the porous layer of these guys or the gills of other species when you put it in your bag. What a beauty.
big stump.
Honey, that's like twice the size I thought it was gonna be. That's awesome. Show us the base of the cap. Very cool, very cool. And then there's this one. So remember, we don't want to take too many. This may seem like an absolute ton, but trust me when I say we've only walked about 100 yards. This is a secret spot, and this is why we keep it secret, because it stays productive like this. We're going to leave the rest of them in case you stumble upon this spot. But remember, if you do find it, it may be new to you, but it may not be new to us or someone else. So please keep your spots quiet, keep them productive, and that is the best way to maintain sustainability. It just started to dump rain, so we were going to cook outside, but it looks like we're going home. We're going to cook in the kitchen. I got to get out of this.
So when you bring them back to the kitchen, you have a pretty short window to deal with your mushrooms. So the first things we do is clean them, split them. I remove the tube layer from the base of the caps, and then I'll saute and freeze whichever mushrooms I want to keep relatively fresh, and I dry the rest separately. I separate out the caps and dry that tube layer separately as well. Then I'll set aside the dried caps and stems, and I'll use that tube layer specifically to make essence of porcini. We have a coffee grinder specifically designated for this so that our porcini powder doesn't end up tasting like coffee. We're just going to powder it up once it's bone dry in that dehydrator, and then we'll set it aside in a jar, and we can use that throughout the year. Now before we get into the recipe, I want to do a review here on a drone that was recently sent to me by a company called Ruko. This is the F11GIM2. Now I'll be honest, old dog, new tricks. I was a little intimidated about starting to figure out how to use a new toy like this, but it was incredibly user-friendly. The whole thing fits down in basically a lunchbox style box. It's easy to put together. So your phone actually fits in on the top of the controller here, and it comes with cables both for your standard iPhone as well as for your Android, so you can switch it out depending on what kind of phone you have. Now the drone itself unfolds like this, and each arm is equipped with a brushless motor, which makes it very stable. It comes with 2 batteries and a charging port. It doesn't come with a micro SD card, but you can pick those up at pretty much any Best Buy. And that's what you use to shoot your footage. So once you remove this guard here, it's also got this little film, protective film on it that you can remove so that you can actually get your footage and then take it on out in the field and play with your new toy. You're going to download the Ruko app, which is what allows you to control it from your phone. Turn that thing on, and after a real quick calibration, which basically gets the internal gyroscope all set up, then you're ready to fly. Fire that bad boy up, take it on up, and get yourself some aerial footage. So it's definitely not recommended to start out in the forest like this. You can see the outtakes for proof of why that is. But I wanted to get some shots in the pines because the pines are where you find porcini. And these forests are just incredible. Really nice sort of low elevation shots, but look at how smooth this footage is. That gimbal is really keeping that footage smooth. I took it out to the ocean too just to get a few shots off the bluff here as well. And yeah, consider me impressed. Well, 100% certainty, I could not be more stoked with this drone. I am seriously looking forward to some absolutely awesome aerial footage. Alright, now back to the cooking. So what we're going to do is we're going to rehydrate our dried porcinis, and we're going to thaw out those sauteed and frozen porcinis. We're going to dust some short ribs in flour, we're going to brown them in oil, add some pancetta, and some shallots, and some garlic. We're going to deglaze that pan. In this case, we're using some beef stock. And we're going to add that broth to all those alliums. Next, we're going to add a little bit of red wine and some tomato paste. A little thyme and oregano, a little bit of bay leaf. Let's add those short ribs back in. We're going to get that bad boy simmering and throw in some carrots and salt and pepper. Chop up those rehydrated porcinis, add those and our fresh frozen porcinis, and a nice healthy spoonful of porcini powder. Simmer that up till everything is nice and combined, and serve it over some Parmesan polenta. Check that out. Diane's been cooking now for 2 hours.
It's your mom's short rib and polenta recipe.
Like comfort food. This is a meal that my mom used to make a lot growing up. So even when Diane was cooking it, I was like, it smells like home. So we got a bunch of porcini in here. That's a mushroom right there. Mm.
Wow, the broth is really good.
Mm.
Perfect compliment.
Mm. Yeah, that broth is bomb. Beautiful texture on that mushroom too. So we did the porcini powder, kind of get that whole umami layer going all through this short rib stew, and got the meat just cooked perfectly. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. I love that. This is the season for, you know, soups and stews. And what were you just saying about the mushrooms?
Oh, it's kind of got like this dark richness, the umami.
Mm-hmm.
So it fits really well with the red wine and the short ribs.
It's freaking awesome. 100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for cooking, baby.
You're welcome.
We're going to do a whole bunch more with porcini powder and other powdered boletes and dried boletes and all that stuff, but I'm freaking hungry. We're going to chow down. Hope you enjoy this one, and until next time, keep the old ways alive. That's why you don't fly in trees.
Now that, whoops.